All right, moving right along, gang. Let us talk again about Nikole Hannah Jones, who is the brain trust behind the 1619 Project. Nikole Hannah Jones, she has gone from strength to strength, honestly. You know, she was the brain trust, like I just said, of the 1619 Project, which is now actually being taught at the grade school level in places like Chicago and Buffalo. So this thing has been a huge success. Of course, most historians have just they've stumbled over themselves to be some of the first ones in line to slobber all over this thing because, of course, now that is what you are supposed to do. Because if you don't, then you're just a racist and a white supremacist. The 1619 Project won a Pulitzer Prize, did a whole video actually last February, I think it was, about that, when the project had actually won a Pulitzer Prize for journalism, for investigative journalism, which again then contradicts why it's actually being taught in grade schools as history, because investigative journalism is not history. So here is one of the first contradictions, and I talked about this before in the 1619 Project. On the one hand, Nikole Hannah Jones has said several times that the project, it's not history, it's not supposed to be objective, it's more of just it's an op-ed, basically. It's a whole bunch of op-eds that are centered around the theme of race and slavery in American history. But that means that it's not history. But then at the same time, the 1619 Project is supposed to reframe all of American history, and like the project as it was originally published said, it was supposed to establish that 1619 is our real founding date, not 1776, because the defining feature of America is slavery. Even though slavery existed in every other place in the world and every other epoch of time, until that time, until the 18th century, slavery was just the norm. So, there you have it. But now, Nikole Hannah Jones has also been offered a teaching post, and not just any teaching post. She was actually offered a chair, the Knight Chair in Race and Investigative Journalism at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Now, this position was supposed to come with automatic tenure. She was supposed to automatically get tenure. And tenure, just in case you're not familiar with that term, it basically is a shield. It's a shield for professors in academia, meaning that the university, the institution at which you teach, cannot fire you. It's very, very difficult to fire a teacher, a professor who actually has tenure. All right, now in order to get that, that's sort of the big goal in academia. You always want to find, at least when I was seriously considering and working towards becoming a part of academia, the academic machine, one of the big goals I know was, after getting all your degrees, finding an institution, getting hired by an institution, and then working your tail off in order to have tenure. Because finally, after you got published and after you got tenure, then you had made it. Now, usually, and I only know this because when I was an undergraduate, in the 4 years that I was there, I think we got 2 new professors. I was part of the history department, so we got 2 new professors in the history department. Every year, at the end of every semester, in every class they taught, these professors had to give us an evaluation sheet. We, the students, had to evaluate them. Did he teach the subject matter well? How was his presentation? Was he prepared? What did you think of the materials that he was using in class? His office hours, was he helpful with you when you came to him with questions about tests, about research papers, etc., etc., etc. And this is the sort of rigmarole that you have to go through. And so after so many years of that, being evaluated by your students, being evaluated by your peers in whatever department you're in, then the college or the university, the institution will, if they want to keep you, they will offer you tenure. Meaning then, okay, you're kind of your own man. We're not going to, you don't have to have evaluations. You can pretty much teach whatever you want, and it's going to have to be something pretty serious for you to be kicked out of here. That's tenure. And this night chair in race and investigative journalism that Nikole Hannah Jones was offered at UNC Chapel Hill was supposed to come with automatic tenure, which in and of itself is peculiar because that is not how academia is run. Everyone in academia, at least in theory, is supposed to prove their spurs. Or they're supposed to win their spurs. Right? Tenure isn't just offered to you. You have to go through the drudgery and the sweat of presenting grade A, top-notch courses and giving 120% of yourself in every single section of every single class that you teach every single semester through your probation period in order to finally get that. Nikole Hannah Jones, she was going to circumnavigate all of that. But this is where the story really gets interesting. This is where the story starts, because the board of trustees at UNC Chapel Hill, for once, actually did something. And they actually intervened and said, no, not exactly. You are not going to come in with automatic tenure. So what they said is that they told Jones that she was going to have a 5-year contract with UNC Chapel Hill. So basically, she has a 5-year probation period. And at the end of every semester and every class that she teaches, she is going to have to go through evaluation. Same as pretty much every single person who enters into academia. Now, of course, the people on the left immediately shouted, bigotry, oppression, racism at the top of their voices. That's dull news. We already know, gang, that they were going to say that. But what has been fascinating has actually been some of the reactions on the so-called right, in which they themselves have had a beef with this. And one of the prime examples of this comes from Reason Magazine, which is a libertarian, it is a fundamentalist libertarian publication, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. The chief editor of which is a guy by the name of Robby Soave. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. It's Soave. And Robby Soave wrote this piece for Reason Magazine. The headline, 1619 Project author Nikole Hannah Jones denied tenure at UNC Chapel Hill. Now, full stop right there. She was not denied tenure. She was not denied tenure. She was simply told that she would not automatically get tenure when she assumed the chair of this race and investigative journalism that the university has. So that in and of itself is it's a misrepresentation of the facts. Now, the subheading of this piece is the real eye-opener. The surprising move raises concerns about academic freedom. In the piece, this is actually what Robby Soave is saying here. Okay? It's clear the faculty within the journalism department wished for this to be a tenured position, and that it's rare for the trustees to overrule the faculty's wishes in matters such as this. Hannah Jones is eminently qualified to teach race and journalism, and while all the details are not known, it's hard to escape the conclusion that she was punished for expressing a politically disavowed viewpoint. Okay, a few points just on that. In the first place, I don't know if it's rare for a board of trustees to overrule the faculty's wishes or not. I know that it is weird that a person who, as far as I know, has no academic experience just to be offered tenure on a silver platter when everyone else is scrambling all over themselves and busting butt trying to actually get tenure. So is Robby Soave actually saying that Nikole Hannah Jones deserved tenure simply because she was a black woman? Because that seems to be what he is implying. Now, you might say, no, Nate, that's not what he's saying at all, because he says that she's eminently qualified to teach race and journalism. Well, why exactly is she eminently qualified? Again, we're back to the fact, is she eminently qualified simply because she's a black woman? That seems to be accepting all of the premises that the left hands out and just mandates are true, which should be, we should react with automatic suspicion to any sort of principle or any sort of paradigm that the left gives us, because we know exactly what the left has become. Excuse me. Now, he says that this is worrisome for academic freedom. He quotes, let's see, Adam Steinball, who is part of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. If it is accurate that this refusal was the result of viewpoint discrimination against Hannah Jones, particularly based on political opposition to her appointment, this decision has disturbing implications for academic freedom, which is vital in allowing faculty members to voice divergent views and in avoiding casting what the Supreme Court called a pall of orthodoxy. What decisions on academic tenure incorporate a form of political litmus test, this freedom is gravely, when decisions on academic tenure incorporate a form of political litmus test, this freedom is gravely compromised. Now that is that is one of the biggest balls of tripe that I have ever had to read out to you guys, because this isn't about politics. I would bet dollars to donuts that the Board of Trustees don't give a damn about Nikole Hannah Jones's politics. In fact, I would be willing to bet that most of them are big old school lefties. They're old-fashioned liberals who are more than happy that a black woman of prominence came to UNC Chapel Hill, because Nikole Hannah Jones has become so prominent, not just in academia, not just in journalistic circles, but in mainstream America. Her being there would mean a lot more dough for UNC Chapel Hill, because of course everyone is going to be wanting to go there in order to, study at the feet of the mistress. Yes, I used the appropriate term, sue me. So this isn't about politics. This is about historical integrity. Because as we have also talked about here before on the channel, gang, multiple times now, the 1619 Project is riddled with problems. It is absolutely riddled with problems. From saying that American democracy only came into being because of black Americans, from saying that 1619 is our founding date, from saying that slavery is actually what was the core from which developed American capitalism. It's all problematic, seriously problematic. There are serious flaws in its methodology, and some of its claims are just absolutely untrue. Like 1619 is our founding date. Another claim that Nikole Hannah Jones said was that slavery was the only reason why the revolutionaries actually initiated the revolution in the first place. They started the revolution. You might have thought that the revolution was about independence. It was about checking the tyranny, the growing tyranny of Parliament, and which the colonists had come to see was also emanating from the person of George III. No. It was all about protecting slavery. That's the only reason why the revolution was fought. Now, as I said, those are all lies. As Gordon S. Wood, an eminent, one of the, probably the most prominent American historians on the Revolution and the early Republic, who is alive today, has pointed out numerous flaws. For example, he pointed out that it was only after the Revolution that states like Massachusetts and New York and Connecticut outlawed slavery. Bradley Burzer, who is a history professor at Hillsdale College, has pointed out that actually leading up to and immediately after the Revolution and going into the first few years of the early Republic, people even in the Deep South, states in the North were outlawing slavery. In the South and in the Deep South that didn't happen, but you had slave owners emancipating their slaves, not just always in their wills on their deathbed, but while they were alive. Just that, you're free, which doesn't jive with what Nikole Hannah Jones is saying. I mean, it's just a falsehood when she says that slavery was the only reason why the revolution was fought. She's ignoring almost 200 years of history and historiography, just like that. Just like that. And what makes this even worse is that the New York Times itself knew that these were lies, because as the World Socialist website has shown, the New York Times has gone in and they have rewritten those claims. So if you go to the 1619 Project now, you won't find the claim that the project's purpose is to reframe American history so that we see 1619 as our true founding day. You're not going to see that. You're not going to see Jones's claim that slavery was the reason why the revolution was fought. You're going to see now that, well, it was one of the primary reasons why the revolution was fought. They went in and they changed it on the slide. Didn't even print a retraction, did not print a correction or anything. They just went in and in true Orwellian fashion, they rewrote it. So Big Brother never made a mistake. Big Brother never made those outrageous claims. Big Brother only stayed within the parameters of, cutting on-edge historical research and commentary. That's the 1619 Project. So Nikole Hannah Jones not being automatically given tenure had nothing to do with politics. It had everything to do with the preservation of the field of history as an actual serious discipline and not simply as a propaganda mill. That is what this was about. And the funniest thing about this, gang, or the most aggravating thing about this, is that Soave actually admits this. He admits that Nikole Hannah Jones was going to be a problem in an academic setting. He admits this because in this piece, let me read to you this paragraph, quote, Hannah Jones has become something of a lightning rod. While the 1619 Project attracted considerable praise, even winning a Pulitzer Prize, many historians, and not just those on the political right, have objected to both the project's framing and certain claims that it makes. Hannah Jones has not always engaged these critics in good faith. Again, that is one of the understatements of the year, because what Nikole Hannah Jones has often done is she has simply silenced her critics by ignoring them or by saying that their criticism comes from the fact that they are white, straight, cisgendered men or they're white, straight, cisgendered women, and therefore they are blinded by their white lenses, which then becomes, ironically, more proof for why the 1619 Project was needed in the first place. Criticisms pointing out the multiple gaping problems in the 1619 Project becomes further proof for why the project is necessary. You can't have academic freedom in that sort of scenario, because not only are academics supposed to be free, when they write papers and propose ideas and whatnot, they're supposed to be free when they actually discuss these things amongst themselves, whether it's in their own departments or with people from other departments. Get sort of a cross-reference dialogue growing, a cross-pollination dialogue going there. You can't have that when you're up against a self-referential, self-sustaining system like the 1619 Project, where you can either praise it, which is therefore proof of why it's good and why it's necessary, or you can criticize it, which then again becomes proof of why it's good and why it's necessary, and proof why you are a bigoted, oppressive, racist, white supremacist who probably worships at the feet of David Duke and who probably has a Ku Klux Klan robe underneath your bed somewhere. You can't have academic freedom like that. And to go even a step further, you can't have academic freedom. You can't even have academia when you treat lies and, I won't even say the truth, but I will say the genuine quest for the truth as exactly the same. Because Robby Soave openly admits that, many actual historians, remember, she's not a historian, Jones is not a historian, he admits that historians have had problems, have pointed out flaws in the project, and that she has not engaged them in good faith. basically she's lied. She lied in her project, and then she doubled down on the lies by not engaging her critics. And yet, that sort of behavior, those sort of tactics are supposed to be treated with as much equality and with as much seriousness and with as much respect as actual scholars genuinely, honestly striving to advance their fields by finding more and more of the truth, uncovering more and more of the truth. When you accept that premise, you haven't just beheaded freedom, you've beheaded academia as well. Because when truth and lies are normalized, and when people are told that they have to treat truth and lies as the same, then you've done the equivalent of putting a gun to your head and blowing out your own brains. Because, of course, nothing, no people, no community, no country, no discipline can survive or even exist when you make that compromise. Robby Soave should be ashamed for even suggesting that the Board of Trustees at UNC Chapel Hill delaying, not refusing, not rescinding or anything like that, just delaying Nikole Hannah Jones's tenure because of her bastardization of history. He should be ashamed for saying that that is worrisome because of academic freedom. That is story number 2.